In this video, I'll be analyzing how horror in 2018 stacks up with other years for the genre. If you want to hear what might be in store for 2019, then stick around to the end of this video. An article has been making the rounds in the horror community titled, "Wasn't this supposed to be the golden age of horror?" The author's thesis is that the horror genre has really deflated since last year, and there hasn't been a good scary movie in 2018. Now, last time I talked about an article on DeadTalks, I basically destroyed the guy, to the point that he went completely silent on the matter and deleted all of his tweets linking to the article. My goal this time is not to destroy anyone, but to simply look back and see how this year stacks up to previous years in terms of what audiences thought, what critics thought, and what I thought. At least, that was my initial goal, to offer an objective comparison of each year. My hypothesis was that 2018 isn't really a bad year overall, but compared to the amazing years we had in 2016 and to some extent last year in 2017, 2018 just doesn't have the firepower to compete. However, as I started to crunch the numbers, I realized more and more issues with this comparison. So my new point of this video is that you can't really objectively compare year to year. I can give my own feelings on which years were the best, but even those are going to be skewed, and here's why. The first year I started logging every film I watched was 2014, so let's start there. This is where I first realized the issue with this experiment. How do you define a horror film? If you include dark thrillers like Gone Girl or Nightcrawler, then I'd consider 2014 to be a pretty decent year. If you take those out, you've got It Follows and The Guest, both of which I love, but then after that, there aren't really a lot of heavy hitters. Even if you only go by horror movies by the strictest definition of the word, there are basically countless amounts of movies that come out every year. Do you include all MPAA major releases? But then what about indie films? Do you try to include good, bad, and mid-tier films from each year and take the audience average, critic scores, and personal scores of each movie? What happens if you have a bunch of good films, but also a bunch of bad ones? Is that considered a good year or a bad year? What if you have the best film of the decade one year, but it's weighed down by some stinkers that also came out that year? How do you even decide what year a movie came out? Many films premiere at a festival and then have their wide release a different year. So the year that the majority of people watch the movie is not the year that the movie came out. Let's not even start to bring up the fact that this article claims 2018 was a bad year for horror, yet it only talks about movies with the addition of a couple of TV shows and high-budget web series. For simplicity's sake, we can't even get into games or books. And I know you're not gonna diss on horror YouTubers, otherwise we're gonna have a problem! But yeah, I don't really see a fair way to compare all of these years. You could frame any of them to be the worst year of the bunch, maybe with the exception of 2016. I don't see how anyone could come to the conclusion that that year sucked, but then again, I'm just basing that off my opinion of the movies that I saw. I try to see movies that I think I'm going to like, but I imagine a different person with different tastes could see a different set of movies and have different opinions of each movie. See, this is why I analyze films and things you missed, and I'm not a ranker or reviewer. But with that all being said, let's get to what you're here for, my opinion. So we start with 2014. I'll be going by the movie release dates listed on a film database called TMDB. It uses the original premiere dates of the film as a release date. So although I didn't actually get to see It Follows until 2015 when it was released commercially in theaters, it will technically be considered a 2014 film for the purposes of this argument. I can already tell you that It Follows was my favorite film of the decade, and really my favorite film in a long time. The other highlights are, as I mentioned, probably closer to the thriller side of the Venn diagram, Gone Girl and Nightcrawler, before horror films like The Guest and Rec 4. And let's get this out of the way now, The Babadook. I know that people love that movie, and that's fine, and I found it to be just kind of an average, cliche supernatural movie that came out basically at the end of the supernatural trend that Paranormal Activity started in 2007. The following year was 2015, and that's also pretty solid, headlined by Joel Edgerton's surprise hit, The Gift. This is where we also have to address the question of what we do with horror comedy. Since The Visit is equal parts horror and comedy, I'm willing to put that on the list. Insidious Chapter 3 was almost a skip for me, but I'm so glad I ended up seeing it because it might just be as good as the first Insidious. I'd say 15 has a few drawbacks though. Unfriended was at least funny in an unintentional way.
Whoa, what is he doing? Oh man, that's hilarious.
Ken?
Oh my god! He put his hand in the blender! You gotta be kidding me! That's how he kills himself?
But you may have forgotten about the Poltergeist remake and the even more maligned Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. I liked both of these years, but even the strength of their highlights isn't gonna stack up to what would follow. Of my top 7 films in 2016, 6 of them are in the territory of horror or dark thriller. If you saw my last video, you already know how I feel about Split, but add on 10 Cloverfield Lane, Don't Breathe, Lights Out, the arguably more thriller-oriented Nerve, but also the more traditional horror piece, The Boy, and you've got a stellar list of highlights. But even 2016 isn't without a few disappointments, and they came from respectable directors, like Adam Wingard's Blair Witch, Rob Zombie's 31, and Gore Verbinski's return to horror with A Cure for Wellness. The author of the article seemed to have a lot of praise for 2017. So let's take a look at what we got that year. It Comes at Night was the leader of the pack for me. I'll never understand why people thought the trailer was misleading or something, or how that would make the movie itself lose credibility, but that might be a topic for a different Dead Talk. I will say that It Comes at Night doesn't have the punch that It Follows had in 14, The Gift had in 15, or Split had in 16, but you can't really blame Schulte for that. It's still very well done. 17 might be the year of divisiveness actually, because I've got Mother near the top of my list as well. And who could forget It? I know I included The Visit in 2015, but I'm not going to include Get Out since that one was much closer to comedy than it is horror. This next one I'm only going to point out because I know people will pull out some less than desirable films when we get to the 2018 discussion. Let's not forget that one of the worst atrocities of the decade took place in 2017.
Please don't make me say it.
Now, at least Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension was the 6th movie of a franchise that had lost its touch several movies ago. The Bye Bye Man really has no excuses for itself. In fact, I saw this movie before it officially came out. This was before it had achieved its meme status. And all I could come up with to say about this film was, a movie so bad I can pretty much guarantee it will become a meme. I literally predicted the future when I wrote that. Let's look at some of the popular reviews. The Pee Pee Poo Poo Man. 457 likes. I've been chanting the Bye Bye Man for the last 2 hours to see if I can get him to kill me so I can forget about this movie. I'm sorry, I really don't like focusing on the negative, but there's just a special place in hell for this one. So that just leaves us with 2018. I feel like most of us will agree that Hereditary and A Quiet Place should occupy the top 2 spots so far this year in some order. Insidious: The Last Key wasn't terrible for a January film, and for a 4th film in a franchise on its 3rd director, it was acceptable. The rest of the year, though, it literally had people eating Tide Pods. We had The Cloverfield Paradox, not the worst thing I've seen and kinda goes more sci-fi than horror, but when you put it next to the first 2 movies, it just pales. And who could forget this historic Things You Missed intro? Roll it. There were a lot of tentpole movies this year, but did any of them really blow you away? In this case, I have to agree with the author of the article. 2018 is a step down overall from previous years. But before we wrap this up, let's revisit my hypothesis that 2018 is weaker than recent years, but that's partially because recent years have been pretty strong. I started this comparison at 2014 because that's when I started logging my movies. However, a few Google searches for horror movies from 2010 to 2013 brought me back to the dark ages. An era where you were lucky to get an awesome horror movie once a year, let alone 2 or 6. The tide started to turn. No, not that tide. The tide started to turn in late 2014 when people started to chatter about an incredibly clever monster film with a creepy synth soundtrack. From that point, we would get a new gem every year, sometimes several. 2017 didn't have a 5-star mind-blowing movie leading the way like the previous years, but it did feature a massive $700 million grossing picture that floated all the way to the top of the world of horror. But maybe more impressively, it was a hit with the fans as well. So, in my opinion, 2018 is a bit of a dip from recent years, but I'd still consider it to be part of a pretty awesome stretch of years in the latter half of this decade. And we've got one more. In less than 2 months, assuming these wildfires don't do to me what Carrie White did to her prom classmates, I'll make it to the long-awaited California 2019. And it's sure to be a year for all you crash queens and motor babies.
Listen up! The feature is bulletproof. The Bye Bye Man is secondary. It's time to do it now and do it loud. Horror boys, make some noise. It's Chapter 2, Happy Death Day to you. Some mutants that are new. World War Z, number 2. Got a new alien. Got a werewolf in the den. Give me more, give me more, give me more. You don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. Got some J-horror with Grudge. No one knows what's up with us. Child's Play coming back. Start the year off right with Glass. Give me more, give me more, give me more. Shut up and sing it with me. Na 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 na. There's a new zombie land. Na 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 na. Rob Zombie's coming back. Na 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 na. And we'll be conjuring. Are you afraid of the dark? I hope not, or you will not have a good year when 2019 is here.